So what we're going to do today is take a look at some of the design choices I made for the body in this particular Greek guitar build-off Invitational build. Specifically, we'll look at the segmented pieces and some of the choices I made for the faceting. Let's go ahead and focus right now on sort of the main thing that's kind of screaming at us, and that is that everything is basically compartmentalized and in individual pieces instead of being one cohesive body. Now, the reason why I did that was, well, there were a couple of reasons, but the main reason was I was going to be using a recycled piece of material, and that recycled piece of material wouldn't fit a normal sized body. However, if you were clever enough to disassemble the guitar and rearrange it in the boundaries of that particular piece of material, it would work. And so that's why everything is segmented like this. There's a lot of open air and space, but in the end, it basically works. So let's take a look at this. So the next thing you'll immediately notice are the facets, or the carves, if you want to call them that. And these are carves that can really only be done easily on a CNC. So this is not something you can do with a file, specifically because these are all mostly concave. So the surface isn't just a facet that you would do with, like, let's say a rasp or a file. It's something that's curved. The arm carve, which is kind of an extreme example of it, doesn't just slope down like a normal arm carve, and it isn't a straight line that you would make with like a file, for example. It's curved. And every single one of these carves is built in a very similar manner. So everything is built with this curve in mind. So this leg rest here is also carved and concave. Horn here is also concaved. You can see that it's all curved within like that. And the reason I did this is because of the way it catches the light. And we were to kind of like play around with that shadow in the light source. You can see how it really catches the light and bends the light in a very kind of pleasing manner. So this is different than like a straight facet that would maybe reflect and refract light. This is a curved element, and so it basically creates shadows, which typically facets don't create. So every one of these carves is creating shadows in the light. So it might be easier to see with this particular view because there are colored highlights from the environment. So the environment now, whether that's going to be a light source like the sun, or artificial lights, or lights bouncing through tinted windows, you're getting the idea of what light and shadow are doing with these carves here. And if I move this around, you can see how all those really soft shadows play around with these carves. And that was really the whole intent of this. Now the back also has some carves. So this is your standard belly carve here. You can't really see it because of the light and the shadow, but essentially what's going on is I've cut away the carbon fiber back to expose and to be able to really get that belly carve in there. So there's the belly carve, and this is more of a traditional belly carve, so it's not doing anything terribly fancy. And I'll just kind of hop back over here. And so right there you can see how the belly carve is really dipping in to three pieces. The armrest here, this upper horn, and then the center body. There's a little dip here. So I even was able to machine the very tip of that belly carve right there, and all that's carved out. Now there is also a all-access carve here for the heel. So again, what I did was I cut away the carbon fiber, right? So it's just a straight line cut into the carbon fiber to be able to make that heel carve. Now this is a traditional heel carve, right? You could do this with a file. This is not concave in any way. It's your typical all-access carve, and this is also hitting three pieces. So it's hitting obviously the central piece where the heel is, and it's hitting the upper horn here. So this has also got a carve to it, and it's hitting the lower horn here. And so the design choice here was, well, let's make these carves in these pieces and let's expose that wood by cutting away the carbon fiber. So I have these really cool sloping carves here for the belly and the all-access carve. Now you also notice that there's a whole bunch of holes. These are locating holes. So because I'm going to be epoxying these pieces onto the carbon fiber, if you were to kind of clamp those pieces, they would just slide around. And I needed a way to be able to locate them precisely, so I put 2 holes for each piece. And what I'm going to be doing here is just using brass threaded inserts into the wood, and then some M5 bolts. So they're going to be M5 inserts and M5 bolts. Again, these are not to hold things together, they're just to locate. They're also going to add that element, that industrial element that I was looking for, so it's got that really cool look to it. And it looks good. I've already mocked it up in real life, so it doesn't look bad at all. What I'm doing here for the guitar jack is using one of these Nutric jacks. So typically you can find these like on speakers or speaker cabs, I think. I'm not really sure. I think a lot of custom basses have them as well. But really all you're doing is creating basically a hole, just a cylinder for it to slide into, and you can put it on a flat surface. And so this is going to allow me to not have to have a traditional jack, you know, on the side of the guitar or the front. I can kind of hide it in the back. And here's my cavity. The cavity will have essentially one thing in it, just a single 500K CTS pot. And I've recessed an element here. So you can see if I zoom in, there's an element here. It's about maybe 3 or 4 mil cavity or a pocket. So it can sit in that pocket, and I can have the post of that pot stick through the actual bamboo. Otherwise, it'd be too thick. And so there's also going to be a carbon fiber control cavity cover, and that'll be created from the same material. And there's also going to be M3 inserts. So these little holes represent M3 inserts for M3 bolts to hold the cav cover. I'm not using magnets anymore. Now, originally, when I essentially released kind of like the first trailer, the teaser trailer for this guitar, I did not have or did not think of the strap buttons. And so I had obviously a spot to put the strap buttons on the upper horn here, but nowhere for the back strap button. So I added this piece here. This is the kind of an afterthought. It wasn't part of my original design, but I added this piece of wood here as an afterthought, and its only purpose is to hold a strap button. But I did put one of those concave carves into it to kind of match the other pieces. Now, keep in mind, this is not the pickup I'm using. The pickup I'm using will have a metal pickup cover. It'll be black. And this is obviously not the knob I'm using. This is just to mock up where the knob's going to go. I'm not going to be using a plastic knob. And the other thing that's a little bit different than kind of real life, and I'll just show you here, is the pockets for the tubes, right? So the neck is constructed out of 3 carbon fiber tubes. You'll notice that in CAD, you know, this is a perfect world and all my dimensions are perfect. You can see how perfectly these tubes are seated into the pockets. Well, they didn't come out that perfect. Just because of the machining process, I'm using a round bit, and you can't really get like a flat, you can't get sharp corners like that basically, right? Because the anvil itself is about 6.35 mil. Cut that in half, you got maybe about 3 mil. So you're looking at basically kind of these roundovers for all the corners. So there are no sharp corners in the pocket, right? They're all rounded over because of the end mill. So because of that, there's a lot of extra space, and I gave myself a little bit of wiggle room too at the end of the tube, so over here, because I didn't know if everything would be seated properly or perfectly. So there's a little bit of space. I want to say about 2.5 millimeters of empty pocket beyond the tube. But in the end, it worked out because now I can fill that with extra epoxy. And the more epoxy I have in here, the better it's going to hold. And so it may look a little bit weird. It's not going to look this clean and neat, but it's going to hold it together. And I think that as at least a good, you know, as far as a prototype is concerned, that's what's important. But that's it. That is the guitar. And those are the design choices I made. So I think it's a pretty cool looking guitar. And just the way the light hits it. Now, obviously this is bamboo that I'm using, not a metallic surface. Although if you can imagine the bamboo being painted with high gloss and like a metallic finish, it would play with light and shadow this way. Right now it's just bare bamboo, which also is quite unique, but it's not going to really give you the light effect as this render is. but it's built into it, so it's designed into it. So those are my design choices for the body. I think it's going to be super cool once it's all together, and I hope it works. I hope that that epoxy really holds that neck. I hope the tubes are rigid enough for the string tension. I hope everything works out. All right, so that's what I have for this week. The body is being worked on in the shop. I'm working on that vid. It'll be out next week. Thanks for watching. Take it easy.